For the past couple of weeks, we've been going back and forth trying to decide how do we balance place differential with lap leaders within our studs, because they were both pretty long races, but they were also inefficient starting orders. For this week, not only is it a longer race, but the starting order is much more efficient, which means we know exactly how we want to play things for this Sunday in NASCAR DFS. A very clear strategy and one I think should be pretty profitable. So let's dive on in and get you set for Sunday's Drydene 400. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to break down Sunday's NASCAR Cup Series race at Dover from a DFS perspective and let you know how you should play things over at FanDuel.com. A lock this week, a bit earlier than it has been the past couple of weeks. Lock is at 2 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. So if you tend to put things off, do them in the afternoon. Make sure you have those lineups in by 2 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. Also, make sure you check out the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, because right now we have a UFC 262 podcast posted via Austin Swain breaking down Saturday's card. You can find that by searching for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcast. Tom Vecchio has tonight's NBA slate covered. I have MLB as well. All that right in the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Make sure you are subscribed, but also if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. Hey, soccer fans, this season, FanDuel and Captain Morgan are teaming up to give you a one-of-a-kind soccer contest. Introducing Captain Morgan's Soccer Pick'em, a weekly fantasy contest that's entirely free to play. The contest is simple. All you have to do is make quick predictions for Saturday games this soccer season. You will earn points for each correct pick and compete for a chance to win up to $3,000 in prizes every single week. Head over to FanDuel and enter the Captain Morgan Soccer Pick'em today. Must be 21 plus to participate. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app. Check eligibility restrictions there as well. And don't forget to make your game day more delicious and sub in the captain. Let's take a look at the track breakdown here for Dover this weekend. And like I said, the past couple of weeks we've gone back and forth. Do we want to go with place differential? Do we want lap leaders? This week, there's no balance. It's all about the lap leaders because it is a 400 lap race, which means there are 40 points available for laps led on FanDuel, and that's a really big number. It is one of the longer races we have the entire year, and it means we're going to have guys who are can't-miss plays. Due to the number of laps they lead, we need to jam them in. There are going to be drivers who are requisite for cashing, basically. It means that you kind of need to go with like a combo type thing where you have a Truex Hamlin lineup, a Truex Larson lineup, Hamlin Larson, et cetera, making sure you have the correct combinations for the drivers who do jump out front and lead a bunch of laps. In last year's first race, the top three drivers all scored at least 7 more points than the rest of the field. Those 3 guys were all in the perfect lineup. If you didn't have at least 2 of them, your lineups were basically toast. 3 drivers in that race in the perfect lineup led 49 or more laps. Even in the second race last year, and these were both shorter races than we had this weekend. They were 311 laps due to COVID. This one is 400. In the second race last year, we saw more than 220 laps led inside the perfect lineup. That was when the starting order was set by an invert. This week, the starting order is very efficient. Only one driver with at least 6% win odds in my win simulations is starting outside the top 9 spots. That driver is Brad Keselowski back in 15th. I'm not as high on Keselowski as I am on some other drivers, not as high on Keselowski as I am at other times. But he is the only guy in the top 10 in my win simulations starting outside the top 10. So if we want lap leaders, we want guys who are going to run out front, lead laps, we have to target the front of the pack for this week. We could get a situation like we had with Martin Truex Jr. last week, where he led almost the entire race. And when that happens, a single lap leader lineup can work because Truex is absorbing all the upside at the front by himself. That ups the appeal and place differential and may push you towards someone like Brad Keselowski. But I'm not going to change my approach around that for this week, even though, again, it could happen, given it did happen last week. The main reasoning is that if I use 2 potential lap leaders in one lineup, I'm increasing my odds I choose correctly. I want more darts to throw at the board. My odds of hitting on the correct guys who dominate are higher if I take 2 swipes at that than 1. So even knowing we could have one guy dominate the race, suck up all the lap slide himself, I am still going to have 2 lap leaders in every single lineup at a minimum, and I'm going to get to a third pretty often too. If we can find a mid-range driver, and there are 4 I like, who can lead laps, the upside is pretty big, even if they don't lead laps. Like, let's say I like Joey Logano, and he doesn't lead laps. Even if he gets a top 5 finish at $10,500, that's going to be a plus play. And, it might not make the perfect lineup, but that's going to be a good day for DFS still. With there being 400 laps to be led, we're likely to get probably 3 or so guys again who lead roughly 50 laps. And if one of them is a mid-range play, they're going to be a great option for DFS. So I want to get a good exposure to that range, and we're going to talk about ways to get that in the tier-by-tier breakdown. But one implication of that, if we're trying to jam in Truex, Hamlin, and a mid-range play, is that I'm going to have to punt at times. And I don't mean using guys in the 2,000 range or the 3,000 range, but there are some decent options in the 5,000 and 6,000 range. If we use 2 of those guys, maybe one in the 7,000 range, we're going to get more access to lap leaders. I'm willing to make that sacrifice this weekend, jumping down a bit more, lowering my expected finishing position and points for those guys to get access to higher upside at the top. Some decent plays are down there, and Dover does have some attrition, which will push drivers running further back forward. So I am very willing to live more in the value range than usual to get access to the true high upside plays at the top of the board for this week. You can get some value to drivers starting further back here. I mentioned that there is some attrition at Dover. That is very true. That leads to some place differential points, but it's also an inefficient starting order for the value plays, or less efficient there than it is with the studs. Of the top 20 drivers in my model, there are 2 starting 28th or lower, so super far back. 4 guys are starting outside the top 20, but ranked inside the top 20 in my model. So we can get some place differential juice here. That's not to say I'm going to ignore the front, because if we look the tier above that, the top 15 drivers in my model are the ones I would expect to push for top 10 finishes. All those guys are starting inside the top 18. So you do lose some finishing juice by dipping back, and I would like to get a mix. I think for value plays, what I'm saying overall is, if you want to get place differential points, you should get it via the value plays rather than the studs. But for value plays, you can either go with guys closer to the front or guys getting place differential. I think there are some who grade out well for this week in both buckets. We'll talk about those in the tier-by-tier breakdown. Finally, I'm going to lean hard into results in the 750 package to determine who will be fast this weekend. Dover is the first concrete track in that span. Bristol usually is concrete, but was run on dirt this year. But if we look at all the 750 tracks, the overlap they have is they involve braking zones. So there is a heavy overlap in who is good in Richmond and who is good in Bristol and who will be good in Dover this week. I will talk plenty about this package in the tier-by-tier breakdown about which drivers have stood out most in those races, and they will be the focal points of my rosters for Sunday. And that list, if you are not familiar with the breakdown of the packages in the Cup Series, the list so far is Darlington, Richmond, Martinsville, Bristol, and Phoenix. Those are the races I would focus on most heavily when trying to decide who will run out front for this weekend. So to recap, strategy for Dover. You need at least 2 lap leaders in each lineup. You can get away with 1, but it's very risky, and I will not be doing so because I'm going to make mistakes, and I want to give myself more wiggle room to try to get the right guys, and doing 2 gets me that. I will try to jam in a 3rd lap leader as a mid-range option when I can. I will accept place differential with my value plays without trying to force it. I think, again, there are reasons to be skeptical of some of the guys back there, which we'll discuss in the tier-by-tier breakdown. You should be willing to punt with drivers in the $5,000 and $6,000 range. And finally, we can lean on results in the 750 package to make our selections if you're trying to identify place differential options or who will lead laps. So let's apply that to our tier-by-tier breakdown and start here based on the salaries at FanDuel.com, starting off with the elite tier. That is Martin Truex Jr. at $14,000 through Chase Elliott at $12,500. And to me, I think it makes a lot of sense to build around Truex and Hamlin this week specifically. Those 2 guys are $14,000 and $13,000 respectively, and they're starting inside the top 2 spots. Both are ahead of Kyle Larson in 4th. I love Larson. He's great here. He has won in the past with that equipment. or worse equipment, I should say. And he should be good this weekend too. But if we're looking at just the 750 package, it's been Truex and Hamlin who have been the class of the field. Their aggregate average running positions across those 5 races are 3.4 for Truex and 3.2 for Hamlin. They have both led more than 500 laps. Nobody else has led more than 259. I believe Larson has led just 1. Truex has won 3 out of the 5 races. Hamlin has been top 5 in all 5. So Larson is going to lead laps this week. He's going to push them for the win, but they have just been the better drivers in this package so far this year. They both had better average running positions in all 5 races than Larson has had. So to me, they are the better plays. If that makes me underweight on Larson relative to the field, so be it. I'm willing to take that risk. I will say, though, that because I will have so much overall exposure to this range, I would not be shocked if I wound up being even with the field on Larson and overweight on Truex and Hamlin, just because I think that I'm going to be in this range a lot. So I think that although I might be lower on Larson, I might be higher on him as a result of roster construction, if that makes sense. So I'll still get to Larson quite a bit, but I want to be heavier on Truex and Hamlin for this week. Chase Elliott is kind of similar to Larson, where he just hasn't been as good in this package this year. He has good track history. It's not as good in the 750 package. So to me, this tier is ranked Truex 1, Hamlin 2, Larson 3, Elliott 4, but Truex and Hamlin, the class of the field for this weekend. The second tier on FanDuel is Kyle Busch at $12,000 for William Byron at 10.3. And I actually really like a couple of guys at the bottom of this tier. Those guys are Joey Logano and William Byron. Mentioned before that nobody outside of Truex and Hamlin has led more than 259 laps in this package. That 259 number belongs to Logano. He won at Bristol, runner-up in Phoenix, 3rd in Richmond. His worst average running position in this package is 8th, and he has had a top 4 mark in 3 out of the 5 races. It's not like he's bad at Dover either. He's never won here, but he has 4 top 8s in the past 5 races here. He's had a top 5 average running position twice in that span. So I'm a little confused about why he's $10,500. I think he's a very good win bet at plus 1,400. So Joey Logano, someone I like a lot this week, but also I think Byron's good too. I'm also high on him because of how he's running this package. He actually ranks 4th in aggregate average running position behind Hamlin, Truex, and Logano. His worst mark in there is 11th at Phoenix, which is a very different track than Dover. He had a 5th place mark in Bristol. He also had a great run the second race here last year, started 23rd, finished 4th with a 6th place average running position. So I think both Byron and Logano have a shot to win this race. I will have a lot of lines where I start with Hamlin or Truex and then get 2 of the guys in this range. So this tier for me is ranked Logano 1, Byron 2. I'll go Keselowski 3. I think that he could push for a good finish here and he gets some place differential. So I'll put him 3. Kevin Harvick 4, Kyle Busch 5. I think Harvick and Busch are overvalued in the win market, which led to, I think, what I believe to be their being oversalaried for my tastes here. Harvick does grade out pretty well overall in my model. He actually ranks 3rd in projected average running position, but I'm a little bit lower on him than that. I just don't see as high of odds for him to dominate as I do with Logano and potentially with Byron as well. So a little bit lower on Harvick than my model is, but still he ranks 4th ahead of Busch for this week. The mid-range on FanDuel is Alex Bowman at $10,000 through Matt DiBenedetto at $8,000. Ryan Blaney is in the same discussion for me as Logano and Byron, and so is Christopher Bell. Just maybe not quite as high with Bell and Blaney as I am with the other guys. Blaney is $9,500. He has the upside to win. He ranks 5th in aggregate average running position in this package. He's led 192 laps. That ranks 4th behind Logano, Hamlin, Truex. This has not been his best track. He has never finished top 5 here before, but did have a 5th place average running position in last year's second race. He also had never had success at Darlington before last week, but he ran really well there. So he's in great form, exceeding his previous expectations at bad tracks for him, runs well in this package. I think he's a good win bet as well at 20-1 for this week. As far as Bell at $9,000, he was amazing on these tracks in the Xfinity Series. He won 2 of his 4 career races at Dover in the Xfinity Series. He had a win in Bristol. He was runner-up in another, and he's been very good in this package this year. He's starting 11th, so not a place differential guy, but, he could get some juice there too. I'm going to filter in Bell. I'm going to filter in Blaney as well in the same tier as Logano and Larson. I would rank those guys like the mid-range plays who could win. Logano 1, Byron 2, Blaney 3, Bell 4, but all guys are in play for this week despite not getting place differential. Alex Bowman starting a bit deeper in the field at $10,000, starting back in 16th. I don't mind him as a way if you want to get some place differential, but it would basically need to be like a Truex Hamlin lineup where I just expect them to dominate, or it could be one where I assume somebody just dusts the field. He's not as likely to dominate the race as Byron, Blaney, and Logano are, but I do still like him. He has good runs at Dover. He has 3 top 5s in the past 4 races. He's had a top 5, or a top 10, I should say, average running position in all 3 of those top 10s, or top 5 finishes, I should say. I'm willing to use Bowman, but I'd be a bit more enthusiastic about the guys who could lead laps. I'm going to have Bowman for sure, but I think Blaney and Bell have better win odds, so I do think that I want to be, I don't know, at least as aggressive with them as I am with Bowman, potentially even more so. Finally, we do have some drivers with a little bit of place differential juice in this tier. Those guys are Kurt Busch and Matt DiBenedetto. Busch is starting 28th because he crashed in Darlington, and he has place differential upside, but he hasn't been very good in this package. His best average running position across the 5 races is 14th. As a result of that, he ranks just 19th in my model, and that's why I might wind up being higher, or at least just as high on DiBenedetto, even though he's starting 10 spots higher. He's starting 18th. He ranks 14th in my model, and he's a full tier above Kurt Busch there. I could wind up higher on DiBenedetto than Busch as a result, and I don't think that's a bad idea. So I'll rank this tier Blaney 1. I'll go Bowman 2, I guess, just because of the place differential. Bell 3, DiBenedetto 4, Kurt Busch 5, Austin Dillon 6. Dillon's not a bad play either, given how well he ran here last year, but I do think that DiBenedetto and Busch probably better, all things considered, for this weekend. The value tier is Tyler Reddick at $7,800 through Eric Jones at $62, and there's some good options here for place differential. I like both the Erics, Eric Almirola and Eric Jones here. Almirola is starting 32nd. He wrecked in Darlington, but he's been better in the 750 package than the 550. He has a pair of top 5s in his career at Dover, and they actually came when he was running in much worse equipment than he has right now. I would say $7,500 is a very fair salary for Almirola, and one I am willing to pay for sure. Jones is starting 23rd, and I was talking about Almirola, how he finished top 5 in terrible equipment. That's the equipment that Jones is in right now. So not good equipment, but in the 750 package, the driver matters more because there is braking, there is off throttle time. So Jones, not surprisingly, has been better in that package. He finished 9th in Bristol. He had a good run in Darlington, though had some issues and didn't finish as well. For $6,200, I can roll with Jones for sure and accept the fact that his equipment is not as good because he gets me more access to the top-end guys. Cole Custer also starting deep in the pack. He ranks 30th. It is a good track for him. He had average running positions of 10th and 14th in last year's races. He won here in the Xfinity Series. He's $6,500. So I'd rank Jones a little bit higher because I feel better about Jones from a driving talent perspective, but Custer is another value play at $6,500. One guy I'd mentioned who is in play despite not starting super deep in the pack is Tyler Reddick. He is $7,800, starting 12th. My win sims actually show some value on him for an outright bet. I'm not going to bet him because it's still 2.5% that he wins. Not a bet you're likely to win, but clearly the simulations think he can run up front, finish well, and for $7,800, that's pretty good. His projected average running position is 3 spots better than any other driver in this tier based on my model. So I'll have Reddick in tournaments, but I prefer the other guys for cash games. So Almirola, Jones, good cash game options. Custer, not a cash game option, but someone I would consider for tournaments. Just prefer the other guys over him. And then Reddick is a tournament play and someone I think is very interesting from a betting perspective for this week. Non-outright markets mostly. The punting tier is Michael McDowell at $6,000 on down. There are 3 guys down here who are very much on my radar, which makes me feel better about getting in Hamlin and Truex lineups. Those guys are Bubba Wallace, Chase Briscoe, and Ross Chastain. My favorite guy here is Briscoe. He's starting 17th. He won both Dover and Bristol last year in the Xfinity Series. had a good run in Darlington last week, so it seems like his skill on the high bank tracks is translating here to the Cup Series too. He's $5,500. I do like Briscoe. Wallace starting 22nd. He is $5,200. He hasn't been great in this package, but he also has not been terrible. Had a good run in Phoenix. Had a good run, I think, in Richmond too. Ranks 17th in my model straight up. He is actually the highest of anybody with a salary lower than $6,000 ahead of Briscoe. I'm a little bit lower on Bubba than my model because he doesn't have a good history at Dover, but I will still get there. I think that he makes sense for this week. Chastain starting 19th. He's had good runs in Darlington and Richmond the past couple of weeks. He ran well on concrete in the Xfinity Series last year. He had 2 podiums in Dover. He had 1 in Bristol. He's $5,000. So all 3 of Wallace, Briscoe, and Chastain are guys I am willing to use. I would rank Briscoe first, followed by Chastain, and then Wallace. But I will have a decent amount of each guy to help jam in Truex and Hamlin because I want that upside that they get there. So some good punting options for this week on FanDuel. Let's finish up here at the win picks for this weekend. We hit on Truex last week, and my model has Truex as the favorite for this week, 18.2% win odds, but that's kind of boring. So I'll go Denny Hamlin. That's also boring given the betting odds, but hey, he's third behind Truex and Larson. Hasn't won yet this year, so we'll go Denny Hamlin to win for this week among the guys above $10,000. Among the guys below $10,000, it would be Ryan Blaney. He has actually pretty good win odds in my simulations. I want to bet him at 20-1. He's $9,500. Not good track history, but really good form. So I think that Blaney makes sense. Christopher Bell would be my second pick below $10,000, mostly based on what he did here in the Xfinity Series. Talented driver and good equipment, that tends to bode pretty well. That is all that we have for this week. Once again, 2 lap leaders. Make sure you're focusing on the studs. Be willing to use some drivers with low salaries if they get you access to more potential for lap slide and good finishes. I think that is the way to play things for this weekend. Make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. Wherever you listen, you can find us. And if you like what you hear or if you win some money, leave us a rating and review as well. If you have questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for setting up the video broadcast for today. Thank you, Cal, as always, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. Enjoy Dover. Enjoy this weekend. We'll talk to you once again on Monday. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire.